A bullied teen stood up to his tormentors, never realizing they were sent to test his courage. The words echoed in Ethan Parker's mind as he stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, tracing the outline of the bruise forming beneath his left eye. 16 years old, with shoulders already bearing the weight of 1,000 silent battles. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his face that seemed to age him beyond his years. He pressed his fingertips gently against the tender skin, wincing at the sharp sting of pain. Another trophy from another day at Westlake High. The water ran cold over his trembling hands. Always cold in this school, as if the very building refused to offer comfort to those who needed it most. Ethan cupped his palms, splashing water against his face, watching rivulets trace paths down his cheeks like tears he refused to shed. Not here, not where they might see. The bathroom door creaked open. Ethan's shoulders tensed, his breath catching in his throat. Through the mirror, he watched as Marcus Coleman sauntered in, flanked by his usual followers, Damon and Tyler, the unholy trinity of Westlake High. "Well, look who's admiring his new face decoration," Marcus said, his voice bouncing off the tiled walls. "It's almost an improvement, Parker." Ethan's hands gripped the porcelain sink, knuckles whitening. 3 against 1. Always 3 against 1. Leave me alone. The words came out steadier than he expected, surprising even himself. Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and cutting. "Or what? You'll cry to your mommy." "Oh, wait." He snapped his fingers. "That's right. She's not around anymore, is she?" Something hot and dangerous flared in Ethan's chest. The mention of his mother, gone 2 years now to cancer, was a boundary even these tormentors had rarely crossed. Until today. Outside the bathroom window, a figure stood watching from the courtyard below, making a subtle note in a small black book. Unnoticed. Always unnoticed. Dinner at the Parker household was a quiet affair. Ethan pushed peas around his plate while his father, David, attempted conversation that dissolved into uncomfortable silence. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, filling the void between them. "How was school today?" David finally asked, his voice carrying the weariness of a single father trying his best. Ethan shrugged, keeping his bruised eye angled away. "Fine. Any tests coming up?" "Just the usual." The usual. As if there was anything usual about what Ethan endured each day. The usual shoves into lockers. The usual accidental trips in the cafeteria. The usual whispers that followed him through hallways like persistent shadows. David sighed, setting down his fork. "Ethan, I can't help if you don't talk to me." "I don't need help," Ethan muttered, though the throbbing beneath his eye argued otherwise. His father's gaze lingered on him, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might press further. Instead, David just nodded, a sad resignation in his eyes that made Ethan's stomach twist with guilt. "I've got homework," Ethan said, standing abruptly. He carried his half-eaten dinner to the sink, feeling his father's concerned gaze follow him up the stairs. In his room, Ethan collapsed onto his bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars his mother had stuck to his ceiling years ago. They were fading now, just like his memories of her laugh, her voice, the scent of her perfume. He reached for the worn journal on his nightstand, his mother's last gift. The pages were filled with quotes she'd collected throughout her life, words of wisdom and courage she'd hoped would guide him. Tonight, he turned to a page he'd read countless times. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear. His fingers traced the delicate handwriting, feeling the indentations where her pen had pressed into the paper. What was more important than his fear? What would she want him to do? The next morning, Ethan woke before his alarm, his mind surprisingly clear. He dressed carefully, choosing his favorite blue hoodie, a shield of sorts. In the bathroom, he examined his bruise. The angry purple had softened to a yellowish green, still visible but healing. Like everything else, given time. Downstairs, he found a note from his father, gone early for a meeting at the construction company where he worked as a foreman. Beside the note sat a paper bag lunch with a small pack of Ethan's favorite cookies tucked inside. The small gesture of love made his throat tight. The walk to school took him past the old oak tree, where he'd once built forts with friends he no longer had. The morning air carried the crisp promise of approaching autumn, and somewhere, a bird called out in a cheerful melody that seemed at odds with the dread building in Ethan's stomach. At the school entrance, he paused, watching students stream past him, laughing, talking, existing in a world where they belonged. He took a deep breath, clutching the strap of his backpack like a lifeline, and stepped inside. He made it until third period. "Hey, Parker." Marcus's voice cut through the hallway chatter. "Nice of you to show up. We missed our favorite punching bag yesterday afternoon." Ethan kept walking, focusing on the classroom door just 30 feet ahead. 25, 20. A hand grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. Marcus stood too close, his breath smelling of mint gum and malice. "I'm talking to you," he hissed. Ethan met his gaze, something he rarely did. "And I'm ignoring you." A flicker of surprise crossed Marcus's face before his features hardened again. "You think you're tough now? Let's see how tough you are after school." Behind the gym, unless you're too scared, the challenge hung in the air between them. Every instinct told Ethan to look away, to mumble an excuse, to retreat as he always had. Instead, he found himself saying, "I'll be there." The words seemed to come from somewhere outside himself, from some reserve of courage he didn't know he possessed. Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "Your funeral?" he finally said, shoving past Ethan toward his own class. As Ethan walked into physics, his hands were shaking, but something else was stirring inside him too. Something that felt dangerously like hope. From the far end of the hallway, an unassuming janitor watched the exchange, then quietly spoke into a small device hidden beneath his uniform collar. The hours ticked by with excruciating slowness. In each class, Ethan found his thoughts drifting to what awaited him after the final bell. What had possessed him to accept Marcus's challenge? It wasn't bravery. It felt more like resignation, a bone-deep exhaustion with running and hiding. During lunch, he sat alone as usual, picking at a sandwich he had no appetite for. Across the cafeteria, Marcus and his friends kept glancing his way, laughing. Planning. The food turned to ash in Ethan's mouth. "Is this seat taken?" Ethan looked up, startled. A girl stood before him, lunch tray in hand, dark hair falling in waves around a face he recognized but couldn't place. No," he managed, moving his backpack to make room. She sat down with a smile. "I'm Lily. We have English together." "I know," Ethan said, though he hadn't really known. He'd spent so much time trying to be invisible that he'd stopped noticing those around him. "I'm Ethan." "I know," she echoed, a hint of amusement in her voice. She unwrapped her sandwich, taking a bite before asking, "Is it true you're meeting Marcus after school?" News traveled fast at Westlake. Ethan's stomach clenched. "How did you hear about that?" "Everyone's heard," she said simply. Why are you doing it?" It was a fair question, one Ethan himself couldn't fully answer. "I'm tired," he finally said. "Tired of running. Tired of being afraid." Lily studied him, her head tilted slightly. There was something in her gaze. Not pity, which he was used to, but something that looked almost like respect. "Want some company walking there?" she asked. Ethan blinked in surprise. "You want to watch me get beaten up?" A small smile played at her lips. "Who says that's what's going to happen?" For the first time that day, Ethan felt a flicker of something other than dread. Not quite confidence, but something adjacent to it. Something warm. The final bell rang at 3:15 p.m. Ethan stood at his locker, methodically packing his backpack with homework he might never complete if things went as badly as he feared. Around him, whispers spread like wildfire. Word of the confrontation had circulated throughout the school, drawing curious onlookers eager for afternoon entertainment. "Ready?" Lily appeared beside him, her presence somehow steadying. Ethan closed his locker with a decisive click. "As I'll ever be." They walked side by side through hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly. Students parted before them, some offering encouraging nods, others watching with naked curiosity. Ethan felt as though he were walking to his own execution, his legs moving on autopilot. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the football field. A crowd had already gathered behind the gym. More people than Ethan had expected. His steps faltered. "You don't have to do this," Lily said quietly. "You could walk away." Ethan looked at her, then at the waiting crowd. "Yes, I do," he said. "If not today, then tomorrow. Or the next day. It never ends unless something changes." When they reached the gathering, the crowd parted to reveal Marcus and his friends waiting in the center of the makeshift arena. Marcus's face split into a grin when he spotted Ethan. Well, I honestly didn't think you'd show." He cracked his knuckles dramatically. "Ready for your lesson, Parker?" Ethan set down his backpack, his heart hammering so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. His mouth was dry, his palms slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed at him to run. Instead, he stepped forward. "I'm not here to fight you, Marcus." A murmur ran through the crowd. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "No? Then what are you here for?" Ethan took a deep breath. "To ask why. What did I ever do to you? What makes me deserve this?" The question hung in the air, simple yet profound. For a moment, Marcus seemed taken aback, his practiced sneer faltering. "You exist," he finally said, but the words lacked their usual venom. "You're just there, an easy target." "And that's enough?" Ethan pressed, surprising himself with his steady voice. "That's a good enough reason to make someone's life hell?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his friends for support. Tyler stared at his shoes while Damon shrugged, suddenly interested in a cloud overhead. "Look, are we doing this or not?" Marcus demanded, taking a step forward. "Because I didn't come here to talk about feelings." "No," Ethan said quietly. "You came here to hurt me. Again. But I'm done being hurt." With deliberate movements, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his mother's journal. He opened it to the page he'd read the night before. "My mom wrote this before she died. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear." He looked up, meeting Marcus's gaze directly. "I'm afraid of you, Marcus. I have been for years. But I've realized something more important than that fear." "Yeah? What's that?" Marcus scoffed, but his voice had lost its edge. "That you must be afraid too, of something. Otherwise, why would you need to make yourself feel bigger by making others feel small?" A ripple moved through the watching students. Marcus's face flushed red. "You don't know anything about me," he spat. "You're right," Ethan agreed. "Just like you don't know anything about me, about losing my mom, about walking into this school every day, wondering which corner you'll be waiting around, about lying to my dad when he asks why I have bruises." Each word seemed to land like a physical blow. Marcus took a half step back, his aggressive posture faltering. "So here's what's going to happen," Ethan continued, surprised by the authority in his own voice. "You can hit me. Go ahead, in front of all these witnesses. Show everyone exactly who you are. Or you can walk away. We both can." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. Ethan stood, heart racing but head high, awaiting the inevitable blow. Instead, Marcus looked around at the circle of watching faces, at the phones recording the confrontation, at Lily standing supportively by Ethan's side. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. "Whatever," he muttered, backing away. "You're not worth it." But the words lacked conviction, and everyone knew it. As Marcus turned to leave, the crowd parted again, this time with a different kind of respect. Not for the bully's power, but for his retreat. Ethan stood rooted to the spot, unable to process what had just happened. He hadn't been hit. He hadn't run away. He had faced his tormentor and spoken his truth, and somehow, impossibly, it had been enough. Lily's hand found his, squeezing gently. "That," she said with quiet admiration, "was the bravest thing I've ever seen." From the edge of the dispersing crowd, 3 adults watched with calculating eyes. The janitor nodded to a woman in a teacher's blazer, who made a subtle gesture to a man in a delivery uniform. All 3 made notes in identical black books before melting away into the afternoon shadows. The test was proceeding exactly as planned. The next morning, Ethan woke to the unfamiliar sensation of anticipation rather than dread. He dressed quickly, pausing only briefly to examine his reflection. Unmarked, unbruised for the first time in weeks. Downstairs, he found his father at the kitchen table, coffee mug in hand, surprise registering on his face at Ethan's early appearance. "You're up and ready ahead of schedule," David observed. "Everything okay?" Ethan grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, considering the question. "Yeah," he said, realizing it was true. "Actually, things might be getting better." His father's expression softened. "Want to talk about it?" For once, Ethan did. He sat down, taking a breath before describing yesterday's confrontation. Not the version where he was a hero, but the honest version, where he was terrified but stood his ground anyway. David listened without interrupting, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. When Ethan finished, his father was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother would be proud," he finally said, voice rough with emotion. "I'm proud." The simple words wrapped around Ethan like a warm blanket, filling spaces inside him that had been cold for too long. "There's this girl," Ethan added, feeling heat rise to his cheeks. "Lily, she stood by me." David's smile deepened. "I'd like to meet her sometime." "Yeah," Ethan said, surprised to find he meant it. "I think you would like her." The walk to school felt different that day. Lighter somehow, as if the very air had changed overnight. The same trees lined the same streets, but Ethan noticed things he'd missed before. The intricate patterns of bark, the way sunlight dappled through leaves, the cheerful greeting of a neighbor walking her dog. At the school entrance, he hesitated, old habits dying hard. Then he squared his shoulders and walked in, head up. The whispers started immediately, but they weren't the same as before. These were accompanied by nods of acknowledgement, small smiles, even a few congratulatory fist bumps from students who had never spoken to him before. Word of his confrontation with Marcus had spread, growing in the telling until Ethan barely recognized the story. He was organizing books at his locker when a shadow fell across him. He tensed, then turned to find Tyler, one of Marcus's sidekicks, standing alone, shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. "What do you want?" Ethan asked, bracing himself. Tyler looked around nervously before speaking. "I just wanted to say, what you did yesterday, that took guts." Ethan stared, waiting for the punchline, the hidden trap. None came. "Thanks," he said cautiously. Tyler nodded, then added in a rush, "Marcus can be a real jerk sometimes, even to us." He glanced over his shoulder as if afraid of being overheard. "Anyway, just wanted to say that." Before Ethan could respond, Tyler hurried away, disappearing into the stream of students. The encounter left Ethan puzzled but strangely hopeful. If Tyler could question his allegiance to Marcus, perhaps others would too. Perhaps the fragile ecosystem of high school hierarchy wasn't as fixed as he'd believed. At lunch, he spotted Lily waving from a table she shared with a few other students. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan joined them, slipping into an empty seat beside her. "Everyone, this is Ethan," she announced. "Ethan, this is everyone." There were smiles, introductions, easy conversation that flowed around him. Ethan participated cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. These were Lily's friends, drama club members, debate team participants, a mix of students who existed outside the rigid social structures that had defined his high school experience. "We're having a movie night at my house Friday," said a boy named Raj. You should come." "But are you?" "Both of you," added Emma, glancing between Ethan and Lily with a knowing smile. Ethan caught Lily's eye, finding encouragement there. "I'd like that," he said, and was surprised to discover it wasn't a lie. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes, conversations, and small moments of connection that had been absent from Ethan's life for too long. By the time the final bell rang, he felt almost dizzy with the newness of it all. He was halfway to the exit when he spotted Marcus leaning against a row of lockers, alone for once. Their eyes met across the crowded hallway. Ethan expected anger, perhaps a promise of future retribution. Instead, Marcus gave him a nearly imperceptible nod before pushing away from the lockers and walking in the opposite direction. It wasn't friendship or even reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, a truce perhaps. Outside, Lily was waiting by the bike rack. "Walk you home?" she offered. They set off together, their conversation meandering from classes to movies to books they'd both read. It was easy in a way Ethan had forgotten human interaction could be, comfortable silences interspersed with discoveries of shared interests. "Why did you sit with me yesterday?" Ethan asked suddenly, before everything happened with Marcus. "You didn't know me." Lily considered the question, twisting a strand of hair around her finger. "I've noticed you," she said finally. "For a while now. You always seemed, I don't know, like you were carrying something heavy, something you shouldn't have to carry alone." The simple honesty of her answer caught Ethan off guard. "I was," he admitted. "I still am, I guess, but it feels lighter today." She smiled, the afternoon sun catching in her eyes. Good." They reached Ethan's house too soon. He hesitated on the walkway, reluctant to end their conversation. "So Friday? The movie night?" "I'll text you the details," Lily promised. "I have your number from the English project groups." As she turned to leave, Ethan called after her. "Lily, thank you for yesterday. For today." She looked back, her smile warming something deep in his chest. "That's what friends do, Ethan. They show up." Friends. The word echoed pleasantly as he watched her walk away, her dark hair swinging in rhythm with her steps. Inside, Ethan found a note from his father. Working late, pizza money on the counter. The empty house didn't feel quite as empty as usual. He moved through the rooms, dropping his backpack, grabbing a snack, finally settling at his desk to tackle homework. As he opened his math textbook, a small envelope fell out, plain white, unmarked. Frowning, Ethan picked it up. Inside was a card with a simple message in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "The first test has been completed successfully. Prepare for the next phase. You are being watched." Ethan read the message twice, a cold feeling spreading through his stomach. Test? Watched? What did that mean? He turned the card over, searching for more information, but found only a small symbol embossed in the corner. a stylized eye within a triangle. The warm glow of the day faded, replaced by creeping unease. Who had put this in his book? What test were they referring to? And most disturbingly, who was watching him? Ethan moved to his window, scanning the street outside. Nothing seemed out of place. The same quiet suburban scene as always. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, someone was indeed watching, evaluating, planning. The mysterious note cast his confrontation with Marcus in an entirely new light. Had it all been staged somehow? Was Marcus part of whatever this was? No, Ethan decided. Marcus's surprise and discomfort had been too genuine. But something larger was clearly at play. Something he didn't understand. He returned to the note, studying the strange symbol more carefully. It seemed vaguely familiar, though he couldn't place where he might have seen it before. With a sudden thought, he pulled out his phone and snapped a picture of the symbol, then sent it to Lily with a simple message. Ever seen this before? Her reply came minutes later. No. What is it? Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to share. Finally, he typed, "Found it on a weird note in my textbook. Probably nothing. See you tomorrow." He set his phone down, but the unease remained. Whatever was happening, whatever test he had supposedly passed, it was clear that his life was about to become more complicated in ways he couldn't predict. Outside his window, a car pulled up across the street. A man in a delivery uniform stepped out, appearing to check an address on a clipboard. He glanced up at Ethan's window, their eyes meeting briefly before the man returned to his vehicle and drove away. The test was entering its second phase. Sleep eluded Ethan that night. He tossed and turned, his mind replaying the day's events, always returning to the mysterious note and its ominous message. By morning, his alarm clock seemed a cruel joke, announcing the arrival of a day he'd barely prepared for. He dressed mechanically, his movements sluggish from lack of sleep. Downstairs, his father was already gone, another early meeting claiming his attention. Ethan made toast but found he had no appetite. The note lay on his desk upstairs, but its presence seemed to fill the entire house. The walk to school was an exercise in paranoia. Every passing car, every pedestrian, every rustling bush seemed suddenly suspicious. Was that the same man walking his dog as yesterday? Had that woman with the jogging stroller glanced his way too deliberately? Ethan felt his shoulders creeping toward his ears, tension building with each step. At school, he scanned the hallways with new awareness, searching for anything out of place. The janitor who'd always been there, mopping the same section of floor. Had he been watching all along? The office secretary whose eyes seemed to follow students too intently. Was she part of this? "You look like you've seen a ghost," Lily said, appearing beside his locker. "Everything okay?" Ethan forced a smile. "Just didn't sleep well." She studied him with concern. "Is this about that symbol you sent me?" He hesitated. Sharing his paranoia might make him sound crazy, but keeping it to himself felt lonelier than he could bear. "Can we talk somewhere private?" They found an empty classroom, and Ethan pulled out the note, handing it to Lily. She read it silently, her expression growing more troubled with each word. "This is weird," she finally said. "Who would leave this? And what test are they talking about?" "I think it might be about Marcus," Ethan said slowly. "The note says the first test has been completed successfully. What if someone set that whole thing up? What if they sent Marcus to bully me just to see if I would stand up to him?" The idea sounded absurd spoken aloud, yet it was the only explanation that made sense of the note's wording. Lily shook her head. "That's crazy. Marcus has been a bully since middle school. No one sent him. Maybe not originally," Ethan conceded. "But what if someone is using him now? Using all of this? For what purpose?" Lily asked, the question Ethan had been asking himself all night. "I don't know," he admitted. "But the note says prepare for the next phase. Whatever this is, it's not over." The first bell rang, startling them both. Lily handed the note back, her fingers brushing his. "Be careful today, okay? Keep your eyes open. And text me if anything else weird happens." Her concern warmed him despite his unease. "I will." Throughout the morning, Ethan moved through his classes in a state of hypervigilance, noting every unusual glance, every unexpected interaction. Marcus was absent, he discovered, which only added to his growing suspicion. In third period English, their teacher announced a surprise assignment, a debate on courage and its forms in modern society. The topic hit too close to home, making Ethan's skin prickle with awareness. Was this part of the test? Was Missy Peterson, with her sensible shoes and cat-themed coffee mug, somehow involved? At lunch, Lily waved him over to her table again, making room beside her. The conversation flowed around him. weekend plans, homework complaints, movie opinions. But Ethan found it hard to focus, his attention constantly drawn to movements at the edges of his vision. "Earth to Ethan," Raj said, snapping his fingers playfully. "I asked if you're still coming Friday night?" "Oh, yeah," Ethan said, pulling himself back to the moment. "If the invitation still stands?" "Of course it does," Emma assured him. "We're watching the new sci-fi thriller everyone's talking about." Speaking of thrillers, Raj continued, lowering his voice dramatically. "Did you guys hear about the secret society that supposedly operates in town? My cousin swears they recruit high school students for some kind of elite program." Ethan's spoon clattered against his bowl. "What secret society?" Raj looked pleased to have captured everyone's attention. "It's called the Watchers or something equally creepy. They supposedly test potential recruits without their knowledge, looking for specific qualities. My cousin says they have connections everywhere. Schools, businesses, government. That's just an urban legend," Emma dismissed. "Every town has some version of that story." "I don't know," Raj insisted. "My cousin's friend got recruited last year. Disappeared for a summer internship and came back all mysterious. Wouldn't talk about where he'd been." Ethan and Lily exchanged glances. The story was likely nonsense, but the timing was unsettling. "What symbol do they use?" Ethan asked, trying to sound casual. Raj shrugged. "No idea, but they're supposed to be obsessed with tests of character. Bravery, honesty, that sort of thing." The conversation moved on, but Ethan remained stuck on Raj's words. A secret society testing character traits matched too perfectly with the note he'd received. Could such an organization actually exist? And if so, why would they be interested in him? After school, Ethan declined Lily's offer to walk him home, needing time alone to think. The afternoon was overcast, matching his mood as he took a detour through the park, seeking its familiar paths and quiet corners. He was deep in thought when he spotted Marcus sitting alone on a bench by the duck pond, tossing breadcrumbs to a gathering of eager waterfowl. The sight was so incongruous with Marcus's usual persona that Ethan stopped in his tracks, unsure whether to approach or retreat. Before he could decide, Marcus looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to resignation. "Parker," he acknowledged with a nod. Something about the unexpected encounter, about Marcus's solitary breadcrumb tossing, made Ethan bold. He approached the bench. "Mind if I sit?" Marcus shrugged, moving over slightly. They sat in awkward silence for a moment, watching the ducks squabble over the bread. "You weren't at school today," Ethan finally said. "Yeah, well," Marcus tossed another handful of crumbs. "Didn't feel like facing everyone after yesterday." The admission of vulnerability was so unexpected that Ethan hardly knew how to respond. He opted for honesty. "I know the feeling." Marcus gave him a sidelong glance. "Yeah, I guess you would?" More silence, less awkward now. A duck waddled boldly up to the bench, quacking demandingly. Marcus broke off a piece of bread, offering it directly. The duck snatched it from his fingers and retreated. "My dad used to bring me here," Marcus said suddenly. Before he left, "We'd feed the ducks every Sunday." The personal detail, freely offered, shifted something in the air between them. Not friendship exactly, but a momentary lowering of guards. "My mom and I did the same," Ethan replied. "She loved watching the baby ducklings in spring." Marcus nodded, as if this shared experience formed a tenuous bridge across the chasm of their history. "Look, about yesterday. Has anyone strange approached you recently?" Ethan interrupted, seizing the moment of connection. "Anyone asking you to—" "I don't know, test me somehow." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "What? No." "What are you talking about?" Ethan studied his face, finding only genuine confusion. Either Marcus was an exceptional actor, or he truly wasn't part of whatever was happening. "Nothing." Ethan backtracked. "Forget I asked." Marcus watched him for a moment longer, then returned to feeding the ducks. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I was a jerk. Not just yesterday. For a long time. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more than Ethan had ever expected to hear. "Yeah, you were," he agreed, but without heat. A small smile tugged at the corner of Marcus's mouth. "Still got guts, I see." They sat together until the bread was gone, and the ducks lost interest, dispersing across the pond in search of more generous benefactors. The conversation remained light, careful, but real, discussing teachers they both disliked, a recent movie they'd both seen, neutral territory that acknowledged their new reality without directly addressing it. When they finally parted ways, Marcus hesitated, then extended his hand. "See you around, Parker." Ethan shook it, feeling the surreal nature of the moment. "See you around." As he walked home, The mysterious note and its ominous message seemed less important somehow. Whatever test awaited him, he'd face it when it came. For now, it was enough to know that people could change, himself included. He was nearly home when his phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Meet me at the library tomorrow after school?" Found something about that symbol. Ethan typed back a quick agreement, curiosity reigniting. He was about to put his phone away when he noticed a car parked across from his house. The same delivery vehicle he'd spotted the previous evening. As he watched, the driver looked up, made direct eye contact, then deliberately started the engine and drove away. The message was clear: you are being watched. The test's second phase had begun. The school day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Ethan moved through his classes in a fog, his mind fixed on the afternoon's library meeting with Lily. Marcus had returned to school but kept his distance, offering only a brief nod when their paths crossed in the hallway. An armistice neither was quite ready to call friendship. By the time the final bell rang, Ethan's nerves were stretched taut with anticipation. He hurried to his locker, shoving books into his backpack, when a folded paper fluttered to the floor. Heart pounding, he picked it up, unfolding it with cautious fingers. The measure of courage is not in confronting enemies, but in facing truth. Second test begins now. Below the cryptic message was the same eye and triangle symbol. Ethan's hands trembled as he refolded the note, sliding it into his pocket. Another message, another test. But what truth was he supposed to face? The library stood 3 blocks from the school, a century-old building of stone and stained glass that seemed better suited to a university campus than a small-town public library. Ethan hurried up the worn steps, pushing through the heavy oak doors into the hushed interior. Lily waited at a corner table, surrounded by books and printouts, her dark hair falling forward as she bent over her research. She looked up as Ethan approached, eyes bright with discovery. "I found it," she whispered as he slid into the chair beside her. "The symbol. It belongs to a group called the Custodians." "The Custodians?" Ethan repeated. "Not the Watchers?" Lily shook her head. "Different name, same concept as what Raj was talking about. They're supposedly a secret organization that identifies and tests young people with potential for something. The sources are vague about their ultimate purpose." She pushed forward a photocopy of an old newspaper article. The headline read, "Local teen disappears, returns with tales of secret training." "This is from 1987, Ethan noted, scanning the yellow text. "A kid named Michael Braden disappeared for 6 months, then came back claiming he'd been recruited by a group that tested his character before offering him special training. Everyone thought he was making it up," Lily continued, "until he started demonstrating unusual abilities. Advanced mathematics, foreign languages he'd never studied, physical skills beyond his previous capabilities." Ethan frowned. "So what, there's some kind of super secret tutoring service?" "Or something more," Lily said, lowering her voice further. "Look at this." She slid over another printout, this one from a conspiracy theory website. It detailed supposed custodian activities across decades, connecting them to unexplained technological advances, political shifts, even historical events that had changed world history. "This is pretty far-fetched," Ethan said doubtfully. "I know, but look at the pattern." Lily pointed to a section listing known custodian recruitment practices. They identify candidates, usually teenagers facing significant challenges. They arrange tests of character, courage, integrity, compassion, without the candidate's knowledge. If the person passes, they move to direct contact and formal recruitment. The description matched Ethan's experience too closely to dismiss. "So according to this, standing up to Marcus was my first test?" "Maybe," Lily said. "And now they're preparing your second test, whatever that means." Ethan pulled out the new note, sliding it across the table. Lily read it, her expression growing troubled. "Facing truth," she murmured. "What truth are they talking about?" "I have no idea," Ethan admitted. "But I got another sign today. The same delivery van was outside my house again. The driver made sure I saw him." Lily chewed her lower lip, thinking, "We need more information. Let me see if I can find anything about—" "Excuse me." They both looked up, startled. A woman stood beside their table, middle-aged with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun and glasses perched on her nose. She wore the library's staff badge, but Ethan didn't recognize her as one of the regular librarians. "The library will be closing early today for a staff meeting," she said, her voice pleasantly neutral. "You'll need to gather your materials." "It's only 4 o'clock, Lily protested, checking her watch. "The library's usually open until 9. Special circumstances," the woman replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're welcome to return tomorrow." She moved away, delivering the same message to the few other patrons scattered throughout the building. Ethan and Lily exchanged glances. Convenient timing, Ethan muttered, gathering their research materials. Too convenient, Lily agreed. Let's make copies of everything before we leave. They hurried to the copy machine, feeding in articles and printouts while glancing nervously over their shoulders. The woman watched from the circulation desk, her attention never wavering. Outside, the afternoon had turned gray and threatening, dark clouds gathering overhead. They walked quickly, huddled close against the rising wind, their conversation pitched low beneath the rumble of distant thunder. So what do we do now? Ethan asked, clutching the folder of copies. We need to figure out what truth they want you to face, Lily said. It must be something significant, something you've been avoiding or denying. Ethan shook his head. I can't think of anything specific. I mean, my mom's death was hard, but I've never denied it happened. Maybe it's not about your past. Lily suggested, maybe it's something about your present or your future. They paused at a street corner, waiting for the light to change. Across the intersection, Ethan spotted a familiar figure, the janitor from school, watching them openly. When their eyes met, the man nodded once, deliberately, then turned and walked away. That's him, Ethan whispered. One of them, the school janitor. Lily stared after the retreating figure. We should follow him. What? No, that's crazy. Don't you want answers? Lily challenged. This might be our only chance. The light changed. Decision time. Follow the mysterious janitor into unknown territory or return to the safety of home and uncertainty? Ethan thought of his mother's journal entry about courage, about the strange notes and their cryptic challenges, about being watched, tested, evaluated without his consent. Let's go, he said, stepping off the curb. They followed at a careful distance, hanging back at corners, ducking behind parked cars when the janitor glanced back. He led them through unfamiliar streets, away from the town center toward an industrial area neither had reason to visit before. The first drops of rain began to fall as the janitor approached a nondescript warehouse with no visible signage. He punched a code into a keypad beside a metal door, which slid open with a mechanical hum. Before entering, he turned, scanning the street behind him. Ethan and Lily pressed themselves against the wall of a neighboring building, hearts pounding. After a moment, the door closed with a definitive clang. Now what? Ethan whispered. Lily pointed to a narrow alley running beside the warehouse. There might be another way in, or at least a window to look through. They darted across the street, rain falling more heavily now, soaking through their clothes as they crept down the alley. Halfway along the building, they found what they were looking for. A small window at eye level, its glass clouded with grime but intact. Wiping away the dirt with his sleeve, Ethan pressed his face to the glass. Inside, the warehouse opened into a vast space filled with computer terminals, laboratory equipment, and what appeared to be training areas with exercise equipment and obstacle courses. People in matching gray uniforms moved purposefully through the space, some carrying tablets, others engaged in conversation. What do you see? Lily asked, trying to peer over his shoulder. It's like some kind of command center, Ethan described, moving aside so she could look. Or a training facility. Lily gasped as she took in the scene. It's real. The custodians are actually real. A sudden banging sound from inside made them both jump back from the window. Had they been spotted? We should go, Ethan urged, tugging at Lily's arm. This is too dangerous. But before they could retreat, the alley entrance was blocked by a figure in the same gray uniform they'd seen inside. The woman from the library. Curiosity, she said, approaching slowly, seemingly unbothered by the rain. An admirable trait when properly directed. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Lily. Who are you? What do you want with me? The woman smiled, a genuine expression this time. Direct questions. Good. My name is Director Keller. As for what we want with you, Ethan Parker, that depends entirely on what you want for yourself. What does that mean? Ethan demanded, struggling to keep his voice steady. It means you've been selected as a potential candidate for our program, Keller explained. Your first test, confronting your tormentor with words rather than violence, showed promise. Your second test is now underway. The truth I'm supposed to face, Ethan realized. What is it? Keller's expression softened slightly. That's for you to discover. But I will give you this guidance. Sometimes the hardest truths are those we hide from ourselves. From behind them came the sound of the metal door sliding open. Two more uniformed figures emerged, one of them the janitor they'd followed. You have a choice now, Keller continued. You can leave, return to your lives, and we will not contact you again. Or you can come inside, learn more about who we are and what we offer, and continue your evaluation. The choice is yours. Ethan glanced at Lily, finding her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. We're in this together, she whispered. Whatever you decide. The rain fell harder, thunder rumbling overhead. Ethan thought of his life before all this. The loneliness, the fear, the sense of drifting without purpose. Then he thought of the changes of the past few days. Standing up to Marcus, making new friends, discovering courage he hadn't known he possessed. If we come with you, he said slowly, are we in danger? No physical harm will come to you, Keller assured him. But I won't pretend there are no risks. Knowledge changes people. Some find the weight of it too heavy to bear. It wasn't entirely reassuring, but Ethan appreciated the honesty. He took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm settle over him despite the circumstances. I want to know more, he decided. About you, about these tests, about what you're offering. Keller nodded, seemingly pleased with his response. And you, Miss Chen, she asked, turning to Lily. You weren't part of our original assessment, but you've shown remarkable loyalty and resourcefulness. Lily squared her shoulders. Where he goes, I go. Very well, Keller gestured toward the open door. After you. As they approached the entrance, Ethan felt a tremor of apprehension. Were they walking into a trap? But curiosity and a deeper sense that this was somehow meant to be propelled him forward. Inside, the warehouse was even more impressive than the glimpse through the window had suggested. The space hummed with activity, screens displaying data, people conferring in small groups, some practicing what appeared to be martial arts in a designated area. Keller led them to a small conference room off the main floor, gesturing for them to sit at a polished table. The janitor, no longer in his custodial uniform but in the gray attire everyone here seemed to wear, joined them, along with a younger man Ethan recognized with a shock as his physics teacher, Mr. Bennett. You too? Ethan blurted. Bennett smiled apologetically. We maintain positions throughout the community to identify potential candidates. Your aptitude test showed significant promise, even beyond your academic performance. What exactly is this place? Lily asked, looking around with undisguised curiosity. What do you do here? The custodians, Keller began, were founded over a century ago with a simple mission: to identify exceptional individuals and prepare them for roles that would shape the future. We operate outside traditional power structures, beyond governments and corporations, guided by principles rather than profit or politics. Like what principles? Ethan asked. The advancement of human potential, the protection of knowledge, the preservation of balance in a world increasingly out of balance. Keller's voice carried conviction that was difficult to doubt. We seek those who demonstrate not just intelligence, but wisdom. Not just strength, but courage. Not just skill, but purpose. And you think I have those qualities? Ethan couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. We think you have the potential for them, Keller corrected. That's what the tests determine. Not everyone passes. What happens if I fail? You return to your life with no memory of this conversation. The casual mention of memory manipulation sent a chill through Ethan. You can do that? Keller's smile was enigmatic. We can do many things that would seem impossible to most. So what's the second test? Ethan asked, returning to his most pressing concern. The note said something about facing truth. Keller and Bennett exchanged glances. The second test, Bennett explained, evaluates your ability to recognize and confront difficult truths about yourself, about others, about the world. It's already underway. How do I pass it? That's not how this works, Keller said gently. We don't give you the answers. We create the conditions that allow your true nature to reveal itself. Frustration welled in Ethan. So I'm just supposed to go about my life waiting for some mysterious truth to reveal itself? Your life, Bennett pointed out, has already changed significantly in recent days. New friendships, new confidence, a truce with your former enemy. Perhaps the truth you need to face is already presenting itself, if you're willing to see it. The cryptic response was unsatisfying, but Ethan sensed he wouldn't get clearer guidance. Instead, he changed tack. What happens if I pass all your tests? What then? Then you'll be offered a place in our training program, Keller explained. A year of intensive education, not just in academic subjects, but in areas most schools never touch. Perception enhancement, intuitive cognition, physical disciplines that integrate mind and body. And after that year? After that, you choose. Some join us permanently, taking on roles within our organization. Others returned to their communities, using their training in fields of their choosing: medicine, technology, education, government. We placed no obligations on our graduates beyond a commitment to use their abilities responsibly. It sounded too good to be true. A secret society offering extraordinary training with no apparent strings attached. Yet the evidence of their existence, their resources, their reach was undeniable. "Why me?" Ethan asked, the question that had nagged him from the beginning. "That," Keller said, "is part of the truth you need to face." Before Ethan could press further, a chime sounded. Bennett checked a device on his wrist, then addressed Keller. "The situation in Sector 7 requires your attention, Director." Keller nodded, rising. "We've said enough for today. You'll be escorted back to a location near your homes. Consider what you've learned. The second test continues, whether you're conscious of it or not." "Wait," Ethan protested. "I still have questions." "Of course you do," Keller acknowledged. "And in time you'll have answers. But for now, reflection serves you better than explanation." She gestured to the janitor, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. "Mr. Reeves will see you out. Should you wish to contact us before the completion of your test, he is your designated liaison." With that, Keller and Bennett left the room, leaving Ethan and Lily with the silent Mr. Reeves. After a moment, he stood, indicating they should follow. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening in the early evening light. A black car waited at the curb, its driver anonymous behind tinted windows. "This will take you home," Reeves said, opening the rear door. "A word of advice. The truth you seek may be closer than you think, but recognizing it requires letting go of what you believe you already know." With that cryptic parting statement, he ushered them into the vehicle. The doors locked automatically, and the car pulled away from the curb with smooth precision. Ethan and Lily sat in stunned silence as the car navigated through unfamiliar streets, eventually emerging onto roads they recognized. Neither spoke until the vehicle stopped a block from Lily's house. "This is your stop, Miss Chen," came a voice through an unseen speaker. "Mr. Parker will continue to his residence." Lily hesitated, then squeezed Ethan's hand. "Call me tonight?" He nodded, unable to find words adequate for the experience they just shared. The door unlocked, and Lily stepped out, turning back for one last glance before the car pulled away. Alone now, Ethan watched the familiar landscape of his neighborhood slide past, his mind racing with questions. What truth was he supposed to face? How was he being tested even now? And most pressingly, what did he actually want? The car stopped in front of his house. "Good evening, Mr. Parker," the disembodied voice said as the door unlocked. "Remember, truth is rarely comfortable, but always necessary." The car remained at the curb until Ethan reached his front door, then drove away with a quiet hum. Inside, he found a note from his father. "Working late again, dinner in the fridge." Alone in the silent house, Ethan climbed the stairs to his room, collapsing onto his bed. His wet clothes clung uncomfortably, but he lacked the energy to change. The day's revelations swirled in his mind, too overwhelming to process. On his nightstand, his mother's journal caught his eye. He reached for it, seeking comfort in its familiar pages. As he flipped through, a passage he'd read countless times seemed suddenly to stand out with new significance. "The hardest person to be honest with is yourself. We build stories about who we are, what we're capable of, what we deserve. But true growth begins when we have the courage to question those stories." Ethan read the words again, feeling them resonate with unexpected depth. Was this the truth he needed to face? The stories he'd told himself about who he was, the victim, the outsider, the boy defined by loss and pain. He thought of the changes of the past few days, standing up to Marcus, making friends, following a mystery, taking risks. None of these actions fit the story he'd been living, the identity he'd accepted. Outside his window, the setting sun broke through dissipating clouds, casting his room in golden light. Ethan closed the journal, feeling a strange certainty settling over him. The second test had never been about the custodians, or their mysterious organization, or even the bullying he'd endured. It was about recognizing a fundamental truth he'd been hiding from. He was not defined by what had happened to him, but by the choices he made in response. For years, he'd chosen invisibility, believing it was safer. He'd chosen isolation, believing it was inevitable. He'd chosen to see himself as powerless, because acknowledging his own agency meant accepting responsibility for change. The custodians, with their tests and observations, had simply created conditions that forced him to see what had always been true. He was capable of courage, connection, and change. He always had been. As this realization crystallized, Ethan felt something shift inside him, a weight lifting, a door opening to possibilities he'd never allowed himself to imagine. Whatever came next, whether he passed the custodian's tests or not, he would never return to the person he'd been before. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "You okay?" Ethan smiled, typing back, "I think I just passed the second test." Her response came quickly, "Tell me everything." But some truths couldn't be explained in text messages. Some transformations had to be witnessed. "Tomorrow," he promised. "But I think I finally understand what they've been testing." Outside his window, unnoticed in the gathering dusk, a figure watched from across the street. Director Keller spoke quietly into a communication device. "Second test complete. Proceed to final phase." The third and final test was about to begin. Morning brought clarity Ethan hadn't expected. He woke before his alarm, feeling unusually rested despite the previous day's turbulence. Outside, birds announced the dawn with cheerful insistence, and sunlight streamed through his window, warming his face. He dressed with deliberate care, choosing clothes that made him feel confident rather than invisible. Downstairs, he was surprised to find his father at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee. "Dad? No early meeting today?" David looked up with a smile. "Took the morning off. Thought we could have breakfast together. It's been a while." The simple statement carried unspoken acknowledgement of the distance that had grown between them. Ethan felt a surge of gratitude as he slid into the chair opposite his father. "I'd like that," he said softly. David studied him over the rim of his coffee mug. "You seem different lately." "In a good way. Something you want to talk about?" Ethan considered the question. How much could he share? The bullying, yes. Standing up to Marcus, certainly. But the custodians, their tests, the warehouse full of secrets? That seemed a step too far. "I've been figuring some things out," he said carefully. "About who I am. Who I want to be." His father nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Your mother always said you had more strength than you knew." Seems she was right. The mention of his mother, rather than bringing the usual ache, filled Ethan with warm remembrance. "I found her journal again," he shared. "Been reading it a lot." "She'd like that," David said, his voice gentle. "She wrote it for you, you know." When she knew she wouldn't be here to tell you herself. This was news to Ethan. "I thought it was just her personal journal." David shook his head. "She started it when she got sick. Said there were things you'd need to know someday, and she wanted to make sure you heard them from her, even if she couldn't be there in person." The revelation sent a ripple of emotion through Ethan. He'd treasured the journal as a connection to his mother, but hadn't understood it was intentionally crafted as her legacy to him. "Dad," he said, a thought suddenly occurring to him. "Did Mom ever mention an organization called the Custodians?" David's coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. Then it was gone, replaced by casual curiosity. "Can't say that rings a bell." "Why do you ask?" There was something in his father's tone, a careful neutrality that struck Ethan as deliberate. Before he could press further, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," David said, rising quickly. Ethan remained at the table, listening to the murmur of voices from the entryway. After a moment, his father returned, followed by Director Keller. Gone were the gray uniform and institutional demeanor. Today she wore a casual blazer over jeans, looking like any professional woman paying a morning visit. "Ethan," she greeted him with a warm smile. "It's good to see you again." David looked between them, eyebrows raised. "You two know each other." "We met recently," Keller explained smoothly. "Through a special academic program I oversee, your son has shown remarkable potential." Ethan watched his father carefully, searching for signs of surprise or confusion. Instead, David nodded as if this explained everything. "I've invited Miss Keller to discuss an opportunity for you," he said to Ethan. "A summer program that might be a good fit for your interests." The casual way his father accepted Keller's presence, the lack of questions about this supposed academic program, it all pointed to one startling conclusion. "You know," Ethan said slowly, "you've known all along." David and Keller exchanged glances. After a moment, his father sighed, shoulders slumping slightly. "It's time," Keller said quietly. "He's ready." David nodded, then turned to Ethan with new resolve in his eyes. "Yes, son. I know about the custodians. I've known since before you were born." The confession hung in the air between them, reframing everything Ethan thought he understood about his life, his family, his identity. "Were you one of them?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. His father shook his head. "No, I was a candidate like you. I completed the tests, entered the training program. But ultimately, I chose a different path." Why didn't you tell me? Because that's not how it works. David explained gently. Each candidate must come to the custodians on their own terms, through their own journey. Foreknowledge would contaminate the process. Ethan turned to Keller, new questions forming. Did you target me because of my father? We never target anyone, Keller corrected. We observe. We create conditions that allow potential to reveal itself. Your father's history made us aware of you earlier than most, but you were selected entirely on your own merits. And my mother? Ethan asked, the question that now seemed obvious. Was she part of this too? A shadow passed over his father's face. That, he said softly, is the truth you need to face. The final test. Keller placed a small box on the table. Your mother left this for you, to be given when the time was right. When you were ready, the box was simple wood, polished to a soft sheen, with the now familiar symbol carved into its lid, the eye within the triangle. Ethan stared at it, his hands suddenly unwilling to reach out, to cross the threshold this revelation represented. What's inside? He asked, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. The truth, Keller said simply. Your truth. With trembling fingers, Ethan pulled the box toward him. The lid opened smoothly on silent hinges, revealing a folded letter and beneath it, a small object wrapped in silk. He unfolded the letter first, his heart recognizing his mother's handwriting before his mind could process the words. My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, then you've begun a journey I always hoped you might take. A journey I began myself long before you were born. The custodians found me when I was 17, much as they've found you now. They saw in me what others didn't. Not just intelligence or talent, but potential for something greater. They trained me, shaped me, opened my eyes to a world beyond the one most people ever see. For 20 years, I served their mission, working in places around the world where knowledge needed protection, where balance needed restoration, where human potential needed champions. It was challenging, sometimes dangerous, but always meaningful. Then I met your father, himself a former candidate who had chosen a different path. We fell in love, and I faced the most difficult choice of my life, to continue my work with the custodians or to build a family with the man I loved. I chose both for a time. You were born, and for 7 wonderful years, I balanced my two worlds. But then came my diagnosis, and with it, the necessity of final choices. I don't regret a single moment. Not my years with the custodians, not my decision to step back for our family, and certainly not the privilege of being your mother. Each chapter of my life has had its purpose, its lessons, its gifts. Now you stand at a threshold I once crossed myself. The choice before you is profound: to pursue extraordinary potential and purpose, or to embrace the beautiful ordinariness of a life untethered to such responsibility. There is no right answer, my darling boy. There is only your answer. The object enclosed with this letter was given to me when I completed my training. It has certain properties that Director Keller can explain. I leave it to you now, regardless of what path you choose, as a reminder that extraordinary possibilities exist in this world, if we have the courage to embrace them. Know that I am proud of you, not for what you might become, but for who you already are. A boy with a gentle heart, a curious mind, and more courage than he knows. All my love, always. Mom tears blurred Ethan's vision as he finished reading. He set the letter down carefully, then unwrapped the silk bundle with reverent hands. Inside lay a simple pendant on a silver chain, a small crystal sphere that seemed to capture and refract light in impossible ways, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the table. What is it? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. We call it a memory crystal, Keller explained. It contains impressions, moments your mother wanted preserved. When you hold it, you can experience those moments as if you were there. Ethan looked to his father, who nodded confirmation. It's how she wanted to share her life with you, the parts she couldn't tell you about while you were growing up. With careful fingers, Ethan lifted the pendant. It felt warm against his palm, almost alive with subtle vibration. As his fingers closed around it, the kitchen seemed to fade around him, replaced by a cascade of images, sounds, feelings. His mother, younger than he'd ever known her, standing in a training room similar to what he'd glimpsed in the warehouse, moving through forms that seemed part dance, part martial art, her face alight with concentration and joy. His mother in what appeared to be a rainforest, working alongside others in custodian gray, carefully extracting what looked like ancient tablets from a hidden chamber. His mother holding infant Ethan, whispering promises in his ear, while a pendant identical to the one he now held glimmered on her chest. His mother in a hospital bed, speaking earnestly with Keller, both of them occasionally glancing at a younger David who slept in a chair by the window. The visions faded, leaving Ethan gasping slightly, tears streaming freely down his face. He looked up to find both his father and Keller watching him with compassionate understanding. "She was extraordinary," Keller said softly. "One of our finest. The work she did, saving knowledge that would have been lost, protecting innovations that weren't ready for the wider world, mentoring other young candidates, it left a legacy that continues to this day." "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan asked his father, no accusation in his voice, only wonder. "She made me promise to wait," David explained, "until you were ready, until you found your own way to the custodians, if that was your path. And if they hadn't found me, then you would have received this on your 21st birthday," his father said. "With no expectations, no pressure, just truth." Ethan looked down at the pendant still warm in his palm, then back at the letter, his mother's final gift. The truth he'd been meant to face all along wasn't about his own limitations or potential. It was about his heritage, his mother's secret life, the legacy she'd left for him to either embrace or set aside. "The third test," he said, turning to Keller. "Is this it? Learning about my mother?" "The third test," she corrected gently, "is what you do with that knowledge. How you integrate it into your understanding of yourself, your past, your possible futures." "What are my options?" Ethan asked, feeling strangely calm despite the enormity of what he'd learned. Keller leaned forward, her expression earnest. "You can join our summer training program with no obligation beyond those 3 months. See if this life calls to you as it did to your mother. Or you can decline, keep the pendant as a memento, and continue your life as you see fit. Either choice is valid." "And Lily?" Ethan asked, suddenly remembering his friend who had been drawn into this alongside him. "What about her?" "Miss Chen has received her own invitation," Keller assured him. "Her path intersected with yours by chance, but her potential is evident in its own right." Ethan nodded, grateful that Lily wouldn't be excluded because of his decision, whatever it might be. He closed his fingers around the pendant, feeling its gentle warmth pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "I need time," he said finally, "to think about all this." "Of course," Keller agreed, rising from her seat. "Take the weekend. On Monday, Mr. Reeves will be at your school. Give him your answer then." After she left, Ethan and his father sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of revealed secrets settling around them like dust after an earthquake. "Are you angry?" David finally asked. "That we kept this from you?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "No," he decided. "I don't think I am. Confused, overwhelmed, maybe a little hurt, but not angry." Relief softened his father's features. "Your mother worried about that, whether you'd understand our reasons." "I think I do," Ethan said. "She wanted me to find my own way." David reached across the table, covering Ethan's hand with his own. "Whatever you decide, son, I'm behind you." So was she. The simple affirmation, so long needed and now freely given, filled a space in Ethan's heart he hadn't realized was empty. "I need to see Lily," he said, standing. "To talk this through." His father nodded understanding. As Ethan headed for the door, pendant safely tucked in his pocket, David called after him. "Ethan, one more thing your mother would want you to know." He paused, seeming to choose his words with care. "The greatest achievements of the custodians aren't their discoveries or interventions. It's the people they help become their best selves, whether those people join them or not." The words followed Ethan out the door and into the bright morning, a final piece of wisdom from the mother he'd thought he'd lost, but who, he now realized, had never really left him at all. Lily was waiting on her front porch, arms wrapped around drawn-up knees, expression distant until she spotted Ethan walking up the path. She stood quickly, meeting him halfway. "Did you get a visit from Director Keller? A shocking revelation about my family? A mysterious object with impossible properties?" Ethan finished for her. "Yeah, all of the above." Relief washed over Lily's face. "Oh, thank God. I thought I was losing my mind." They sat together on the porch steps, comparing notes in hushed voices. Lily's experience had mirrored Ethan's in structure, if not in content. A morning visit from Keller, a revelation that her grandmother had been a custodian linguist specializing in endangered languages, a small jade figurine that somehow contained memories. "It's so much to process," Lily said, staring out at the quiet street. "Yesterday I was just a normal high school student. Today I'm the granddaughter of some secret society scholar with an invitation to join their summer training program. Are you going to accept? Ethan asked. Lily turned to him, eyes bright with certainty. Absolutely. How could I not? This is everything I never knew I wanted. Adventure, purpose, using my mind for something that actually matters. She paused, studying his face. You're not sure, are you? Ethan sighed, pulling the pendant from his pocket, watching it catch the sunlight. I don't know. Part of me is drawn to it, especially now, knowing my mom was part of it. But another part wonders if I'd be doing it for the right reasons. What are the right reasons? That's just it. I don't know. He closed his fingers around the pendant, feeling its now familiar warmth. My mom chose to step back from the custodians to raise a family. My dad chose not to join at all. Both choices were valid, according to Keller. So what does your heart tell you? Lily asked, her hand finding his. Ethan considered the question, letting himself feel rather than think. That I'm not the same person I was a week ago. That standing up to Marcus was just the beginning of something. That I want more than what I thought was possible for my life. Sounds like you have your answer, Lily said softly. Perhaps he did, but the weekend stretched before him, time to consider all angles, to sit with his new understanding of his mother, his family history, and most importantly, himself. Whatever you decide, Lily added, I'll still be your friend. That doesn't change. The simple reassurance meant more than she could know. A week ago, Ethan had been alone, isolated by bullying and his own fears. Now he had connections. To Lily, to his father in a new way, even to his mother's memory, more vibrant and complex than before. They spent the day together, talking through possibilities, examining the strange artifacts they'd been given, sharing the wonder and uncertainty of their situation. As afternoon mellowed into evening, they walked to the park, finding the same bench where Ethan had sat with Marcus days earlier. Speaking of Marcus, Lily said as they watched ducks navigate the pond's still waters, what do you think happens to him in all this? Does he just go back to being a bully now that your test is over? Ethan hadn't considered this aspect. I don't know. Something changed between us. It felt real, not part of any test. Maybe that's another choice you need to make, Lily suggested. Whether to maintain that peace when this is all over? When this is all over, Ethan echoed, I'm not sure anything will ever be over again. Not in the same way. They parted as sunset painted the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks, promising to meet again the next day. Ethan walked home slowly, his mind full but no longer chaotic. The revelations of the day had settled into something approaching acceptance, if not complete understanding. At home, he found his father in the backyard, tending the small garden that had been his mother's pride. Without speaking, Ethan knelt beside him, accepting the spare gardening gloves David offered. They worked in companionable silence as darkness gathered, pulling weeds, turning soil, preparing for new growth. When they finally stood, brushing dirt from their knees, David placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. She would have loved seeing you out here, he said. She always said gardens were the perfect metaphor for life. Constant work, constant change, constant beauty if you know where to look. Ethan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. They walked inside together, the evening wrapping around them like a shared blanket. Later in his room, Ethan held the pendant again, letting its stored memories wash over him. His mother's life, her work, her joy. One memory lingered longest. His mother sitting by his bed when he was perhaps 5 or 6, telling him a story about a boy who discovered he could fly, but only when he stopped being afraid of falling. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it resonated with new clarity. His entire life, Ethan had been afraid of falling, failing, being hurt, being seen. He'd chosen invisibility as protection, never realizing what possibilities that choice had closed off. Sunday passed in quiet reflection. Ethan spent the morning with his father, looking through old photo albums, asking questions about his mother he'd never thought to ask before. In the afternoon, he met Lily at the library, the regular public library this time, not the custodian facility, where they researched everything they could find about secret societies, historical mysteries, and unexplained historical events that might connect to what they'd learned. By evening, Ethan felt a growing certainty about his decision. He sat at his desk, his mother's journal open beside him, the pendant warm in his palm. He wrote his thoughts in a new journal he'd bought that afternoon. Not just about the custodians and their offer, but about everything. His mother's secret life, his relationship with his father, his newfound friendship with Lily, even the fragile truce with Marcus. When he finished writing, The clock showed just past midnight. Monday had arrived, and with it, decision time. Ethan slept dreamlessly, waking to pale dawn light filtering through his curtains. He dressed with care, tucking both the pendant and his mother's journal into his backpack. Whatever he decided, these connections to her would go with him. His father was waiting in the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, concern etched in the lines around his eyes. "You don't have to decide today," he said as Ethan entered. "You can ask for more time." Ethan shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "I don't need more time. I know what I want to do." Relief and something like pride crossed his father's face. "Whatever you've decided, I support you." "I know, Dad." Ethan embraced him, the gesture becoming easier, more natural with each passing day. "That's part of why I can make this choice with confidence." At school, an air of anticipation seemed to follow Ethan through the hallways. Or perhaps it was just his heightened awareness, his new understanding that ordinary spaces could conceal extraordinary realities. He spotted Marcus by the water fountain, their eyes meeting briefly. No hostility remained, just mutual acknowledgement. Another type of test passed. Another door opened where before had been only walls. Lily found him at lunch, sliding into the seat beside him with infectious excitement. "Today's the day," she whispered. "Have you decided?" Ethan nodded, but before he could elaborate, Raj and Emma joined them, followed by others from their growing circle of friends. The conversation flowed around familiar topics: weekend activities, upcoming tests, movie recommendations. The ordinary rhythm of teenage life that now seemed simultaneously more precious and less confining. After school, Mr. Reeves waited by the front entrance, looking nothing like the janitor he'd pretended to be. In his gray custodian uniform, he stood straighter, his eyes more alert, his presence somehow more substantial. "Mr. Parker, Miss Chen," he greeted them. "I believe you have decisions to share." They followed him to an empty classroom, where Director Keller waited, her expression neutral but expectant. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "I know this is no small matter you've been considering." Lily spoke first, her decision already clear from her eager posture. "I accept your invitation. I want to join the summer training program." Keller smiled, genuine pleasure warming her professional demeanor. "We're delighted to hear that, Miss Chen. Your linguistic aptitude scores are among the highest we've seen in years. I believe you'll find the program challenging but deeply rewarding." She turned to Ethan, her expression softening slightly. "And you, Mr. Parker? What have you decided?" Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his mother's pendant against his chest where he now wore it. "I've been thinking about what these tests have really been about," he began. "Not just standing up to bullies or facing hidden truths, but recognizing my own capacity for change, for growth." He paused, organizing his thoughts. "A week ago, I was invisible by choice. I hid from confrontation, from connection, from my own potential. I told myself it was safer that way, but really it was just easier. Easier than risking failure or rejection. And now," Keller prompted gently, "now I understand what my mother wrote about courage, about recognizing when something is more important than fear." Ethan met Keller's gaze directly. "I want to join your program. I want to see if I have what it takes to follow the path my mother walked, to use whatever abilities I have for something larger than myself." A smile spread across Keller's face, matched by Lily's excited squeeze of his hand. "We would be honored to welcome you, Ethan Parker," Keller said formally. "The son of one of our finest has found his way back to us." The words sent a warm current through Ethan's chest. Not just acceptance, but recognition of his connection to his mother, to her legacy. "There are, of course, practicalities to discuss," Keller continued. "The program begins 2 weeks after your school year ends. Your father has already been informed of the logistics. You'll need to maintain your current academic standing, and there will be some preliminary readings to complete before you arrive." As she outlined the details, Ethan felt a curious mixture of emotions: excitement, apprehension, and beneath it all, a profound sense of rightness. Whatever challenges awaited in the custodian's training program, he would face them not as the fearful boy he'd been, but as the person he was becoming, someone with courage, connections, and a growing understanding of his own worth. When the meeting concluded, Lily could barely contain her excitement, practically bouncing as they walked out of the school building together. "Can you believe this is really happening?" she exclaimed. "In less than a month, we'll be training with the custodians, learning things most people don't even know exist." Ethan smiled at her enthusiasm, feeling his own building beneath his more reserved exterior. "It's pretty incredible," he agreed, "and a little terrifying." "The best things usually are," she said, linking her arm through his as they walked. That's how you know they matter. Ahead of them, the afternoon stretched golden and full of promise. Students streamed from the school building, most unaware of the hidden realities that existed alongside their ordinary world. Ethan had been one of them just days ago, blind to possibilities beyond his limited understanding. Now his eyes were opening to a larger truth, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. That connection, not isolation, was the true path to strength. That his mother's legacy lived not just in memories and mementos, but in the choices he made and the person he chose to become. As if summoned by his thoughts, the pendant warmed against his chest. With it came a fleeting impression. His mother smiling with pride, her presence so vivid he almost turned, expecting to find her walking beside him. "Are you okay?" Lily asked, noticing his sudden stillness. Ethan nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. "Yeah," he said, meaning it completely for perhaps the first time in years. "I really am." Together they walked toward the future, not just the summer that awaited them with the custodians, but all the possibilities that lay beyond, unfolding like pages in a story he was finally ready to write for himself. Behind them, unnoticed, Director Keller watched from the school steps, making a final note in her small black book, before closing it with satisfaction. "Test sequence complete," she murmured to herself. "Welcome to the custodians, Ethan Parker. Your journey has just begun."